In the heart of Washington, D.C., a new and unexpected conflict is taking shape, one that's not playing out in the halls of Congress or on the campaign trail, but within the solemn walls of the city's federal courthouses. This is not a battle between political parties or rival ideologies, but a struggle over the very rules and traditions that define American justice. On September 30, 2025, inside the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse, U.S. Magistrate Judge Zia Faruqui delivered a rare and stinging rebuke to federal prosecutors, sending shockwaves through the legal community. Judge Faruqui accused the prosecution of breaking with long-standing legal tradition and, in doing so, undermining the very rule of law that the courts are sworn to uphold. The case at the center of this storm seemed, at first glance, to be routine, a straightforward gun possession charge. But what began as a simple matter quickly escalated into a major legal showdown, drawing national attention. Judge Faruqui charged the U.S. Attorney's Office with bypassing the federal grand jury process, a move he argued threatened the very foundation of the justice system and the constitutional rights of the accused. This clash has exposed a growing and uneasy divide over how justice is pursued in the nation's capital, especially as a sweeping federal crackdown on crime, ordered by President Trump, brings new urgency and pressure to the city's legal system. The influx of federal agents and prosecutors, tasked with delivering quick results, has created new friction with the judiciary, which is determined to uphold due process and constitutional safeguards. For many, this moment is about more than a single case. It's about the balance of power between prosecutors and judges, and the enduring importance of legal checks and balances. Judge Faruqi's actions signal deep concern that aggressive prosecution tactics, if left unchecked, may be eroding the core legal principles that have long defined American justice. His public challenge has transformed what might have been a minor legal dispute into a flashpoint, a heated debate about power, procedure, and the meaning of fairness in the justice system. Now, the debate centers on whether the relentless drive for convictions is pushing law enforcement to bend, or even break, the rules that are meant to protect everyone. Legal scholars and civil rights advocates are watching closely, warning that the outcome could set a precedent for how justice is administered in high-stakes cases across the country. As this dramatic confrontation unfolds, the strength and resilience of our legal institutions and the principles that guide them are being put to a profound and very public test. To fully grasp Judge Faruqi's sharp criticism, we first need to understand the unique and crucial role the grand jury plays in our justice system, a role that is often misunderstood or overlooked by the public. The grand jury is not just another group of jurors. It serves as a powerful buffer between the government and the individual, acting as a gatekeeper before anyone can be formally charged with a serious crime. Unlike a trial jury, which determines guilt or innocence at the end of a trial, a grand jury's job is to decide if there's enough evidence to even bring charges in the first place. This makes the grand jury a critical check on government power, ensuring that prosecutions are not brought lightly or without cause. Before someone can be formally accused, prosecutors must present their evidence to a group of ordinary citizens, people drawn from the community, who must be convinced that the case has real merit and is not simply a product of overzealous prosecution. If the grand jury agrees that the evidence is strong enough, it issues what's called an indictment, allowing the case to move forward to trial. But if the grand jury is not convinced, it can refuse to indict, effectively stopping the case in its tracks and protecting the individual from unwarranted prosecution. This process is a fundamental protection in our legal system, ensuring that citizens aren't subjected to baseless or politically motivated accusations. It's a safeguard that stands between the power of the state and the rights of the individual. In reality, federal grand juries rarely refuse to indict because prosecutors typically only bring forward cases where the evidence is already strong and convincing. That's why there's a famous saying in legal circles: a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. It's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that indictments are almost automatic, given the way cases are presented. So when a grand jury actually says no, it's a rare and significant event. It signals that the jurors have real doubts about the government's case and are willing to stand up to prosecutorial pressure. Such refusals are not just procedural, they are powerful reminders of the grand jury's role as a shield for the citizen, protecting individuals from the immense power of the state. That's why Judge Faruqui saw the prosecutor's next move as a serious breach of this vital protocol, a move that threatened to undermine the very protections the grand jury is meant to provide. The integrity of the grand jury process, and the trust citizens place in it, was now at stake, raising profound questions about fairness and justice in our system. The conflict erupted over a gun possession case in D.C. Federal prosecutors, confident in their evidence, sought an indictment from a grand jury. But the grand jury refused, finding the evidence insufficient to bring charges. This was a rare and significant setback for the prosecution. It wasn't an isolated incident. At least 7 grand juries in D.C. had recently declined to indict in similar cases. Even a case involving threats against President Trump was rejected. This pattern revealed growing skepticism among citizen jurors about the federal crackdown. For prosecutors, the grand jury's refusal was a major obstacle. Instead of reassessing, they chose a new strategy. Their decision to push forward, despite the grand jury's rejection, set up a direct clash with Judge Faruqui. The stage was set for a confrontation over the rules of justice. The stakes had just been raised. When the federal grand jury blocked their case, prosecutors faced a major setback. But instead of giving up or simply searching for new evidence, they decided to take an unusual and bold step. Rather than accept the grand jury's decision, they brought the case to a different venue, D.C. Superior Court's local grand jury. This move was rare, and it signaled just how determined the prosecutors were to keep the case alive. The tactic, which Judge Faruqui later described as grand jury forum shopping, involved seeking out a new group of citizens in hopes of getting a different result. It was a calculated risk, and one that raised eyebrows in legal circles. The local grand jury did what the federal one would not. They handed down an indictment. With this new charge in hand, prosecutors tried to bring the case back to federal court, hoping the local indictment would force the issue. Their goal was clear: use the local indictment as a lever to reopen the federal case, bypassing the earlier roadblock. But Judge Faruqui quickly recognized what was happening. He saw through the maneuver almost immediately. To him, it looked like an attempt to sidestep the authority of the federal grand jury, a move that could set a troubling precedent if allowed. Judge Faruqui refused to accept the local indictment, calling the prosecutor's strategy a violation of fundamental legal norms and traditions. He argued that treating the grand jury system like a game, shopping for a favorable outcome, undermines the very integrity of the justice process. By rejecting what he saw as a shortcut, Judge Faruqui set the stage for a direct confrontation over the rules and boundaries of the judicial process. Now, the integrity of the entire court system was at stake, with both sides digging in for a legal battle that could have far-reaching consequences. The fight over justice had spilled out of the courtroom and into the public eye, drawing national attention and sparking debate about fairness, power, and the limits of the law. Judge Faruqi's rebuke was swift and direct. He called the prosecutors' actions an end run around the legal process, breaking with decades of tradition. The judge accused them of undermining the grand jury's role as an independent check on power. He warned that forum shopping erodes public trust and makes justice look like a numbers game. Faruqui suggested these tactics were politically motivated, aimed at inflating crime-fighting statistics. He saw this as a dangerous politicization of justice, where appearances trump principle. By refusing to accept the indictment, he defended the court's integrity and the rule of law. His message: the judiciary will not be used to validate flawed processes. A clear boundary had been crossed, and the judge was determined to defend it. The courtroom had become the front line in a battle for legal norms. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro fired back at Judge Faruqi's criticism. At a press conference, she accused the judge of overstepping and injecting politics into the courtroom. Pirro, herself a former judge, painted Faruqui as soft on crime and biased against prosecutors. She insisted her office was simply doing its job and that the judge should leave politics out of it. Pirro argued that prosecutors have a duty to pursue justice and used a legal option to secure an indictment. She framed her team's actions as determination to protect public safety, contrasting it with what she called the judge's leniency. The dispute quickly escalated into a public war of words. Pirro's strategy: shift the focus from her office's tactics to the judge's motivations. The conflict was no longer just about legal procedure, it was now a battle of ideologies. Both sides were digging in for a prolonged fight. This clash is part of a larger conflict in D.C., fueled by President Trump's federal crackdown on crime. The pressure on prosecutors to deliver results has led to more aggressive tactics and more friction with the judiciary. The unusual number of grand jury refusals signals a disconnect between prosecutors and citizen jurors. Judges like Faruqui are now referees in this escalating battle, tasked with upholding legal integrity. The judiciary's role is to enforce the rules, even against powerful prosecutors. This is a classic tension: the executive branch's drive for results versus the judiciary's duty to protect rights and due process. The federal crackdown has brought this conflict to a boiling point. The future of justice in D.C. hangs in the balance. The public feud between Judge Faruqui and U.S. Attorney Pirro has exposed a deep divide. Faruqui defends legal tradition and fairness, accusing prosecutors of breaking essential norms. He warns that ignoring a grand jury's decision threatens impartial justice. Pirro counters by painting the judge as political and soft on crime, appealing to public fears. She insists her office is simply holding lawbreakers accountable, not forum shopping. The city's justice system is now caught between two starkly different philosophies. This conflict is about more than one case. It's about the foundations of justice. Legal procedures are the guardrails that keep the system fair and transparent. When prosecutors bend the rules, public trust erodes, and the grand jury's protective role is lost. The principle that no one faces trial without sufficient evidence is a cornerstone of liberty. Judge Faruqi's stance defends this principle. A grand jury's no must be respected. Upholding the rule of law protects everyone, ensuring fairness and accountability. The methods we use to achieve justice matter as much as the outcomes. A victory won by breaking the rules is no victory for justice at all.